All right. Good morning. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning for a discussion on artificial intelligence and education, and in particular, the ways in which AI is connecting to improved and better supported career pathways for students. I'm David Mansuri. I serve as president and CEO of SCORE. And as many of you know, SCORE is a nonpartisan education policy and advocacy nonprofit organization founded by Bill Frist, the former U.S. Senate Majority Leader from Tennessee in 2009. And at SCORE, our mission and really focus is ensuring that all Tennessee students are provided with an excellent education that prepares them for success in college, career, and in life. And as AI and other sort of tools around artificial intelligence are growing in capability and reach, so does its influence and ability to support improved education outcomes and improved education sort of pathways for students. And so I'm really excited to facilitate today's SCORE Institute conversation that we really hope can contribute toward broader learning around this emerging topic for partners in Tennessee and across the country. So during our event today, we will hear from education and industry leaders in Tennessee, and we'll hear their perspectives on artificial intelligence through both a keynote presentation and a panel discussion, where we'll dig deeper into the ways in which AI is being used and could be used to better support student learning and improve career pathways for students. I'll just say up top, we would invite you to submit questions for our panelists via the Q&A tab that's at the bottom of your screen. So throughout the conversation today, if you have anything that you'd like to go deeper on, feel free to pop your question into the Q&A tab at the bottom. We'll be keeping a close eye on questions and comments that folks share, and we'll be sure to elevate those for our panelists later in the conversation. We'll also share some thoughts at the end of the conversation today around what we've learned on this topic at SCORE. This is an area that we have been rapidly focusing and sort of expanding our attention and work around. This is a topic that we think has incredible promise for improved teaching and learning for students, and want to share a bit at the end of our conversation about what we've learned about the intersection of artificial intelligence and education, and perhaps some principles for use and discovery that are top of mind for our team and that might be top of mind for educators, policymakers, and others who are working in this space. So as I'm sure most of you have observed, AI has grown and developed rapidly in a very short period of time. Generative AI, the newest type of AI that we've seen through tools like ChatGPT as an example, has the ability to generate new content, including things like images and videos, which really provides the opportunity for creativity and production of new content very, very rapidly. We know that GenAI is making an impact on everyday lives and in work, necessitating us to really respond in the way we think about education and career preparation so that students are prepared for jobs of the future. There is certainly a part of this conversation that's about improved teaching and learning, but there's also part of this conversation that's about what skills do we want to make sure students have so that they're prepared for a world in which artificial intelligence is showing up in lots of different ways in the world of work. And this technology development, while still new and really uncharted territory for many, presents opportunity for innovation in lots of different ways. It can add capacity, increase productivity, reduce time for tasks that perhaps could be used for other things, and often acts as a creative partner in idea generation and content development. And in education, we're seeing ways that knowledge and use of AI can support students to being prepared for high demand, high wage careers, careers that we know will increasingly rely on technology like artificial intelligence. We're also seeing AI-powered tools that are providing teachers and students supports in learning. building critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, student agency, reducing the amount of time spent on administrative or non-teaching tasks. And I think, two of the areas that our team has been most interested in is the ways, as an example, that AI could be used as a support around tutoring, and the ways in which AI can be used to provide more sort of timely professional development and feedback to educators. And we'll talk more about these use cases later in our conversation today. So with innovation in mind, SCORE began convening a set of national leaders and Tennessee partners in mid-2024 to really discover the potential of artificial intelligence in education, to build knowledge about GenAI, and to explore emerging trends for AI in education. What are we seeing in the field? What do we know is providing promise for students and teachers? And we had the privilege of learning about lots of different components of this work. We learned about the technical side of GenAI from experts at Vanderbilt University. We learned about how district leaders are implementing GenAI nationally from partners at the Center on Reinventing Public Education. And we explored lots of different examples of how GenAI can integrate with teaching and learning, both in the K-12 and in the post-secondary space. We also had the opportunity to hear from Tennessee leaders who are piloting AI tools in both K-12 and higher education settings. And we'll hear some examples of those pilots on our webinar today. We know that many of these early use cases are carving out and really showing new ways of thinking about how to support students and teachers. And we also recognize that this conversation is rapidly changing and evolving, and we're certainly in the early stages right now of thinking about how this work will play out in education. So to kick us off, we're excited to have with us today an expert on artificial intelligence and its impact on education and the economy as our keynote presenter for today's SCORE Institute. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lynn Parker, who is currently serving as the Associate Vice Chancellor Emerita at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and a member of the state's AI Advisory Council. Lynn also has extensive leadership background and research experience as the former founding director of both the AI Tennessee Initiative and the National AI Initiative Office, and also as the former Deputy Chief Technology Officer for the White House. So it's really my honor to introduce Lynn and give her the floor to share her thoughts and perspective on this topic in our keynote presentation today. Lynn, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate that. And let me just share my screen here before we get started. Okay, very good. So what I would like to do today is to kind of give you an overview of artificial intelligence and how it will impact the workplace, the future of work, and what that means for education as well. So to begin, I want to just make sure we all have a sense of the impact that AI is having across our economy, across society today. So here are some examples. Here's a road, lots of potholes and so forth. Here's a bunch of people on the phone looking very frustrated. Here are some birds that look like they're getting ready to fly into a windmill. Here's a radiologist examining a mammogram. Here is a wildfire, the beginnings of a wildfire. And here is a cow that looks like she's ready to be milked. So the question is, what do all of these have in common? Well, you can guess the answer, of course. AI can help. So let's just quickly look at these examples to make sure everyone is clear at the breadth of impact that AI is having across the board. So let's think about making our roads safer. There's an interesting pilot project that has been going on in Australia where they mounted cameras on the dashboards of garbage trucks. And as they were doing their garbage pickup, those cameras were using AI in order to check for damage on the roadways, looking for things like potholes or graffiti or where the lines on the road have deteriorated and so forth. And what they found is that all of those images could be processed by AI to identify lots and lots of road defects across hundreds of miles of road. And so what they were able to do then was to send this data to the people who did the asset management and the road repair, and were able to get the field workers to the jobs most quickly. And so they discovered that significant efficiencies were possible by leveraging AI in this manner. Here's an example of how the state of Tennessee, in fact, is helping citizens when you call in for information and services. So you call in, often you spend hours on the phone or you never can get a person to help you. But they have, Tennessee Department of Human Services has introduced AVA, which is a virtual agent that can help you with your common questions. And what this does is it frees up the people to handle the more complex work. So this is becoming more and more commonplace, particularly with the advent of generative AI. Here's an interesting use case where, since more and more windmills are being erected to try to provide additional types of energy, there are lots of concerns about birds being killed by collisions with these turbines. And so a project was studied to see if AI could actually help. And they discovered that, in fact, you could use AI to detect when birds were approaching windmills, and then have the AI to either slow or stop the turbines as the bird, if bird collision looked likely. And they found, in this case, they focused on eagles, and they found that they were able to reduce the eagle deaths due to the collisions with the turbines by 82%. And this was some work in Germany and some other places as well. Of course, we all care about detecting cancer accurately, and what studies time and time again have shown is that if you couple AI with a radiologist, you're able to improve the odds of detecting cancer. This is true for breast cancer, but it's also true for other types of cancer as well. And so in this fairly recent study, they found that the combination of AI plus a doctor was 3.6% better at detecting breast cancer than a doctor working alone. Certainly, our thoughts and prayers are all with what's happening in California right now. There have been some studies to put cameras in forests to detect wildfires before they even spread. And so this was done in California. I don't know what part of California, to monitor. AI was used to monitor over 1,000 cameras. And in this pilot, they were able to detect 77 fires before any 911 calls came in about wildfires. So this type of approach is a way also to be able to help with human life protection and so forth. And then finally, I'll mention this interesting agriculture example. And in Tennessee, University of Tennessee, in the ag research, they have and across the state, they have implemented a number of automated milking systems. And these are milking systems where the cow herself can actually decide when she wants to be milked and go and up to the machine, and the machine will milk her automatically. They found that when people are interacting with animals like cows, it increases the stress level. And so having an automated milker like this can help cow welfare, which then in turn improves milk production, and it can also reduce labor cost. So these are just some examples, and we could go on all day about lots of different kinds of ways that AI is impacting jobs and the workplace across all sectors of our economy. So AI, I think, is clearly, I don't think anyone argues this anymore. AI is impacting and benefiting nearly every economic sector. Now, if you think about the workplace implications, then they are significant. This is some data that was generated by a number of different think tanks and studies. And so on the positive side, the thinking is that about 75% of companies believe that the AI technologies will help them with their efficiencies in their business, and they plan to adopt them by about 2027. It's anticipated that the US market size of AI by 2030 will be 1.8 trillion, and that will then lead to anticipated net increase to the US GDP of about 21% by the same time frame. Now, of course, it has implications, and the implications are that maybe around half of the current tasks that are conducted in the workforce, in the workplace, may be automated by 2030. And about 30% of the current hours that are worked could be automated. And so that means that over 500,000 jobs in Tennessee are expected to be augmented or replaced by AI. Now, note that this doesn't mean that the jobs themselves will go away. The augmented means that AI is going to be used in the job. It doesn't necessarily mean that an entire job will go away, but it does mean that these jobs are going to be impacted. Why is it that businesses are eager to adopt AI? Well, there are a lot of business benefits that businesses are experiencing. Things like the ability to reduce cost through AI, the ability to increase productivity or improve customer experience, maybe enhance scalability or accelerate innovation and new insights on the business practices, enhance decision making, and eliminate boring or repetitive tasks that workers don't want to do anyway. So these are many of the reasons why we see AI being adopted across all economic sectors. So just as an example, there's a study early on, about a year and a half ago, after ChatGPT was released. And this is a study by MIT to determine the extent to which generative AI like ChatGPT could impact worker productivity. And so what they did in this study is that they had 453 white collar workers, and they divided them into two groups. There's one group that used ChatGPT and another group that did not. And these are people that are trained in doing writing and editing tasks like marketing or grant writing, data analysis, human resources, that kind of thing. And so what this study found is that the people who had access to ChatGPT were quicker at doing their job with some degree of improvement in quality of that job. And they found actually that the job satisfaction of these individuals substantially increased, that they felt somewhat more confident in doing their job. Now, they were a little bit worried about replacement, having these kinds of tools to be able to do their jobs for them. But generally speaking, the people that use these tools were excited about having the enhancement that was available through the ChatGPT and were more optimistic about the future than the group that did not have access to these tools. And if you look at the study, there's an interesting statement that is written in that study, in the reporting of the study, and it points out that ChatGPT and tools like that are especially helpful for people who have good ideas, but they may not necessarily be able to express them well in writing or other types of communication skills. And so what they're finding is that people that have poor writing and communication skills relative to other skills that are important for the job, relative to the idea generation, it could have major labor market implications by expanding the occupational choices to people. So that now if you have good ideas but maybe can't express them well, these kinds of tools will allow you to better express the good ideas that you have and then open up the access to more and more jobs through the use of these kinds of generative AI tools. So that's a very interesting study. If you look more broadly across Tennessee in particular, at UT, when I was in the Office of Research there a year ago summer, we had Boston Consulting Group to do a study for us at the major industries in Tennessee and the extent to which AI might be have implications for those job sectors. And so here in this chart, there's three rows. The first row shows the national employment in various industries that are important to Tennessee. So you can see those written in blue across the top: forestry and ag, manufacturing materials, transportation, logistics, and so forth. The middle row talks about Tennessee employment in those industries, and you can see that it tracks similar to nationally. Interestingly, the bottom row shows the funding that is going into these sectors, AI-related funding that's going into these sectors by various companies that are exploring tools that can be useful in these sectors. And what you see is that there's significant funding going into the sectors that are also of significant importance to the state as it relates to the number of jobs implicated. So one implication or finding that you could take from this is that most key economic sectors that are of key importance to Tennessee are going to be impacted by AI. There's also been an interesting study that Brookings did. It's about 3 years old now, but it's still relevant. And it talks about how the different metropolitan areas across the United States are ready or not ready for AI growth. And what they found is you can see there on the right, kind of the blowout, the pop out part, that's the state of Tennessee. And the orange circles are showing the major metropolitan areas of Tennessee. And it's been classified as potential adoption centers. Now, this study looked at two main aspects. One, it looked at research development, research activity across the states. And number two, it looked at industry adoption. And the combination of those, where we have strong research across the state and we have growing industry adoption of AI, means that Tennessee is now poised for AI growth, according to this study. So we can be a player in the AI growth that's happening across the states and across the world. So my point here then is that AI is and will continue to be an economic and workforce disruptor. Now, if you look at the various sectors and exactly how it's impacting these various work sectors, there's an interesting study here that looked at the count of open job postings that require AI skills. And these are categorized, the different colors there correspond to the same eight economic sectors I mentioned before. So the colors of the icons there, kind of down the middle of the chart. And what we find is that nationally, about 19% of the open job postings were requiring AI skills across all of these different sectors. In Tennessee, this was as of 2022, that number of open job postings was going up by 40%, meaning Tennessee was catching up very quickly in jobs that need AI skills. Now, note that these are not just asking for like computer science experts that know AI deeply. These are asking for people, say, in manufacturing and materials that know everything they already know, used to know for those jobs in manufacturing and materials, but they also know AI skills relevant to manufacturing and materials or any of these other economic sectors. Now, of course, many people are worried about job loss as we talk about AI augmenting jobs across the economic spectrum. If you look at this study from Goldman Sachs, they looked at occupations that existed in 1940, which is the light blue in this chart, compared to occupations that did not exist in 1940, which are the dark blue. And the finding here is that 85% of the growth in employment over the last 80 years has been due to technology-driven creation of new positions. And 60% of today's workers are in occupations that did not exist in 1940. So even though the pace of change seems extremely rapid right now, and I think it is due to AI, this is not particularly new for our economies in that technological changes have resulted in new jobs over time. And so it's not a matter of the jobs just going away, it's a matter of new types of jobs appearing or jobs changing. And so our economy has adapted to this over time. Of course, it is a rapid rate of change now that we also need to adopt to. So it doesn't mean that every single job is going to be impacted identically. So it will have, AI is having a diverse type of impact on different types of jobs. And so here are three kinds of impacts. There are, in fact, some jobs that are going to become redundant because of AI, because most of it, those jobs can be automated due to AI. So things like maybe data entry workers or customer service agents and so forth. It's thought that around 19% of US jobs are exposed to AI in this manner. A lot of jobs are just changing due to AI. And as I mentioned a moment ago, job postings are asking for things like graphic designers that have AI and ChatGPT technology. So this doesn't mean that they're only interested in AI experts, but they're interested in the graphic designer having all the skills they normally had, and they have now familiarity with AI tools that are relevant for graphic design. And you could say this for any topic area as well, protein scientist, content writer, and so forth. So in the year, actually less than a year or so after ChatGPT was introduced, there was a 21 times increase in jobs that mentioned these kinds of tools. And then finally, of course, there are brand new jobs that are being created by AI, things like prompt engineer, senior creative evangelist, and so forth. And these are in high demand, very high paying jobs due to these new AI capabilities. So very quickly, let me just give you a sense of what jobs have looked like prior to generative AI and now what's happening post-generative AI. And we'll just look at a handful of these areas. So if you think about healthcare, in the past, medical diagnosis was reliant on humans, physicians, medical experts manually reviewing images. But now with generative AI, in the example that I showed earlier, AI can help diagnose diseases, often with better accuracy when combined with a human expert. In finance, the data analysis typically was slower and more prone to human error without the generative AI. But now the AI algorithms can predict market trends and manage the investments and so forth with improved speed and efficiency. If you think about customer service, previously human operators were managing all the customer interactions, and that could lead to long wait times. But now we talked about earlier what's happening even in the state of Tennessee. We have these virtual assistants that can help with, particularly with common kinds of questions, and it frees up the human experts for more complex kinds of issues to deal with. In education, the content delivery has traditionally been very static, and personalized learning has been very resource intensive. But now, as SCORE has been exploring and we're seeing across the board, generative AI is providing the opportunities for adaptive learning platforms. This can provide content that's tailored to the individual student needs and enhance their understanding and engagement in the learning process. In journalism, all the reporting was done manually, but now there are AI tools that can take existing data, like for sports or finance, and create news articles or summaries very quickly. In software, there's more and more potential for generative AI to do coding, to do debugging, and to do documentation. And so we're seeing more and more of these kinds of tools that are enabling us to more efficiently create code, debug the code, document the code. So these examples are illustrating that while those jobs are not disappearing, they are increasingly making use of AI. So what this means is that AI-related skills are needed across nearly all disciplines. So that also means that those who can leverage AI in their jobs will be the ones who thrive. So how do we prepare for this age of AI? There are, of course, different career pathways and different kinds of AI savvy that people will need depending upon the type of role that they have. Only about 1% of knowledge sector jobs are going to require the deep, advanced AI understanding. These are the people that are the visionaries and the futurists that are going to be designing novel AI algorithms or generating original ideas about AI. In the middle will be about 9% of the knowledge sector workers that are going to be those who can take an AI solution that may be powered by a commercial generative AI tool, and then adapt it or implement it for a particular application use case. The vast majority of us, 90% of the knowledge sector jobs, are going to be a common AI user. These are people who use AI consumer apps to do their tasks, but they don't have to adapt it to some new task. They don't have to come up with a new way of using it. They just have to be able to know how to use that tool in the context of their job. Of course, what this means is that everyone needs to be AI literate. And that means a lot of things. There are a lot of programs now that are working to teach this kind of AI literacy at lots of different levels. I think, generally speaking, the kinds of topics that you need to learn in order to be AI literate are things like the basic concepts of AI, understanding the benefits and limitations of AI for a given discipline, understanding the ethical and societal implications of AI and how to use it responsibly, because certainly there are ways that AI can go wrong. And so people need to be aware of that to prevent those kinds of negative outcomes from occurring. We all can gain practical skills in using AI tools for specific types of jobs and roles in particular problem-solving domains. We need to understand how to make informed decisions about the use of AI. So this means that we can't just blindly use AI everywhere. We have to understand enough about the pros and the cons and the capabilities of the AI system in order to use it for decision making. And then importantly, we need to foster an appreciation for lifelong learning. No longer are we just going to school for a period of a certain number of years, and then we're done. Obviously, these technologies are changing so quickly and new capabilities are coming on board that everyone needs to have that mindset of lifelong learning. Now, I'm often asked, given the fact that these technologies are here now, and they're having implications for jobs that exist today. It's not only students that are in school that may be impacted in 5 years when they graduate, but it's people today. So I'm often asked, how do I, as a worker in the workforce today, become AI literate? And so this is just an example curriculum. You can scan that QR code and go to a website that steps you through a number of learning curricula opportunities to learn a little bit more about AI so that you can become more AI literate. And this particular curriculum is developed from a non-technical business perspective. So it goes through some concepts and terminology and a little bit of AI history. It gives you a sense of some of the fundamental technology that drives a lot of today's AI systems called neural networks. It goes through some of the business applications and how you might think about AI in business. And then it, of course, talks about some of the ethical implications and the risks and the impact. And so this is an example of one of many different types of curricula that could help someone today, an adult, in the workplace to become AI literate. The kinds of skills that you need, maybe are self-evident, maybe they're not, but it's the ability to decide which tools are the best for a given application. You need to be able to have some design skills, have some judgment and problem-solving skills. Obviously have common sense. AI does not have common sense today, and humans are very much needed to make sure that AI tools are used in an appropriate way, in an ethical way. And we all need to be able to be adaptable and flexible, learning about how to use data. And again, lifelong learning. And so these are the types of skills that we as people are going to continue to need and more in this AI era that we're in. There's an interesting quote that I very much agree with that an MIT professor stated, and particularly talking about generative AI and tools like ChatGPT. And he said, in a world in which we're building a machine that is very good at answering questions, the scarce and complementary human skill is asking good questions. The questions are about our values, our possibilities, about what our future could be. And I think this is the right perspective to have. Yes, you can pose a question to an AI, generative AI tool, but what is the right question to be asking? And I think that's where so much of our focus should be. So everyone needs AI skills relevant to their role, starting with basic AI literacy. And then what, more specifically does this mean for Tennessee? Tennessee is lagging behind top players, but as I mentioned earlier, we do have a strong right to participate in this AI-powered economy. And this is some data, again, that BCG compiled for us at UT Knoxville. And it shows that Tennessee cities are in the mix in terms of having openings for AI postings. And obviously, we have a lot of positives as a state that are going, that are to our advantage as it relates to generating an AI-powered economy for the state. We have a strong economic growth here in the state, a strong history of business attraction. We have deep research activities across the state, and there's emerging AI activity and energy across the state. So this implies then that Tennessee has lots of assets that we can build on so that we as a state can be a leader across the United States in leveraging our assets across education, entrepreneurship, and research to build out our capabilities across the state. This is a busy slide, but I just want to make the message that we have lots going for us here in the state of Tennessee that make us a really strong player in the AI economy. And this is a lot of the reason why at the University of Tennessee, when I was leading there, started the AI Tennessee Initiative. And Dr. Marolis, Vasilios Marolis, is now director of this initiative at UT, and it continues. The goal of this initiative is for Tennessee to become a national and global leader in the data-intensive knowledge economy, and to do this through transdisciplinary education and innovation across the state in partnership, leveraging our unique strengths and opportunities in research, education, and infrastructure, and working together across all of the different economic sectors so that we can prepare our workforce for today's jobs and the jobs of the future. We could talk more about that later. The vision is that in order to accomplish this, we can work together across the state with employers, with researchers, with the talent developers to coordinate activities in all of these different sectors, perhaps fund or invest in particular areas that can help build out these capabilities so that we as a state can be ready for this AI economy. So the message here is that Tennessee should be a leader in proactively navigating the AI transformation. We shouldn't just react to it, but I think we should be proactive in training our students, re-educating our workers, and working together across employers and educators to prepare everyone for these AI jobs. So with that, I'll conclude. Here are the key messages that I hope you've heard from my talk today. First, AI is impacting and benefiting nearly every economic sector, and it will continue to be an economic and workforce disruptor. Those who can leverage AI in their jobs will thrive, and this does not mean that everyone needs to be an AI expert, but it means we need to know how to use AI within the jobs in the areas of expertise that we have. That means that everyone needs AI skills relevant to their role, starting with basic AI literacy. And then finally, we as Tennesseans should be leaders in proactively navigating the AI transformation. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to our panel discussion and the audience Q&A as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. Really insightful research data examples and sort of, really, I think, illustrative ways in which this work will impact what's happening in Tennessee from a workforce development and economic development perspective. So thank you so much for that presentation. Before we move into our panel discussion, I just want to remind folks, if you have questions, things that you'd like to have elevated in the conversation that we're going to have with the leaders who will be joining us for the panel discussion, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A box. We'll make sure to get to any questions that folks have. And we'll just note, I know there were a couple folks who asked questions about this recording. The recording and the PowerPoints that are shared here will be available in a follow-up email that we'll share to all the participants here today. So you'll have access to that, all of that information as a follow-up to our conversation today. So I want to move now into our panel discussion. We're really fortunate to have with us a group of Tennessee leaders who will be able to provide, I think, additional depth and understanding around how leaders across multiple different sectors, from K-12 education to post-secondary education, industry, state agencies, are thinking about artificial intelligence and the ways in which it could influence and impact particularly work in the education space. And so we're excited to have 3 additional leaders who will be joining us for this conversation in addition to Dr. Parker. First is Dr. Sarah Morrison. Dr. Morrison has led the Tennessee State Board of Education as the executive director since 2015, leading policy development across all K-12 education areas in Tennessee. The next is Dr. Scott Langford, who serves as the director of Sumner County Schools here in Middle Tennessee. Dr. Langford's district has been at the forefront of AI exploration by piloting tools to support teaching and learning. And finally, Joe Baker. Joe is the co-founder of Old Smoky Mountain Distillery and Yeehaw Brewing Company, and is also a member of Tennessee's AI Advisory Council. And really thankful to Joe to be able to learn from his perspective, particularly as a business leader in the state, on how he's thinking about the ways in which these tools can better support student learning and also prepare students for the world of work. So I want to jump right into our conversation. And to get us started, I want to ask each of you to share perhaps a bright spot or an exciting opportunity or tool or use case you are seeing or you've learned about as it relates to the application of GenAI. I mean, I mentioned earlier in the conversation 2 that have been particularly striking for our team in the education space. One is the ways in which AI could be used and is being used in student tutoring, and the other is tools that are using AI to provide stronger and more timely professional development and feedback to teachers. But would love to ask each of you to share some bright spots or exciting opportunities or use cases you're seeing in this space. And perhaps I'll start with Scott, and then we'll go to Joe, Sarah, and then Lynn. Scott, if you could kick us off, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think for us in Sumner County, we've had 2 products that have been really exciting. One is Course Mojo, and the other is Timely. I think for Course Mojo, it basically is connected to our high quality materials. We use Wit and Wisdom and ELA, and with 6th graders, it's provided not just a tutor, but a teaching assistant each day in class through everything from beginning to develop topic thesis statements with support to, did you understand the reading? Do you understand the vocabulary? And most importantly for us, taking kids that are on the upper tier of growth where we tend to lose growth and pushing them even higher. Smart kids hated it at the start because it made them go through and tie information to questions. And then for us, Timely as well, because it's taking SISs are clunky when it comes to scheduling, and it limits high school innovation. And we're able to iterate thousands and thousands of potential schedules until we find one that meets the needs of our schools.
Great examples. Thanks, Scott. Joe, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so first I'll comment as a dad rather than a business guy. My youngest is severely dyslexic and really benefited from an Orton Gillingham curriculum early on as a child, and she is using applications that are now allowing her to really thrive in high level classes. Her writing, it's easy to point to it and say, well, the machines are doing the writing, not your daughter. But the reality is her communication with the technology is what's driving the content. And I, just as a dad, I think the ability to see a child that faces some learning differences and some challenges to be able to thrive in the classroom is super exciting. And then just from a business perspective, even just the simple use of ChatGPT by some of our employees that are doing everything from brainstorming new ideas for businesses or creating new approaches to marketing, for instance, or even most recently at Ober Mountain, the ski area up in Gatlinburg, which is one of our businesses, we've incorporated some new technology in the snowmaking that has required our staff to be able to communicate and understand some weather issues that where AI has been helpful. And so it's yeah, in our lives, we're seeing it everything from home and learning with the kids and also making snow. So it's I could fill your day with stories, I'm sure.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Sarah?
That's great. I'm glad I didn't have to go first, David, because I can just say ditto, ditto. I mean, I love hearing what Joe just shared about his daughter and just, I mean, it's so exciting to me to think about how personalization for students can be amplified through the use of AI. I mean, Khan Academy is one example in recent years where we thought, oh, we can get this content in the hands of any child anywhere. Now we can get the content in their hands and personalize it in a real-time way, like you said, with tutoring and with other interventions, and also for core curriculum. I mean, I think we're really just like tip of the iceberg for sure. And so the things that Dr. Langford shared about, the ways that Sumner County is innovating in this space and thinking about scheduling and thinking about, again, the core content amplification for students in middle grades where you can often lose engagement, I think is just super exciting. One other one that I'll note that I find particularly exciting too is another problem that we have yet to solve in K-12 is how do we really effectively and at scale advise all students in the middle school and high school space about career opportunities and where they're headed next. And I've already seen through Career Villages and some other like organizations, the ability to think about AI to better scale that advising challenge that we face. So those are areas that I see in kind of a more macro sense. On a personal front, I don't know about Dr. Parker, but I've been using AI for my slides recently. It's super helpful. I can take really text-heavy slides and come up with better images that are more hopefully engaging for audiences. We use it at home for story time sometimes. My husband will say to ChatGPT, tell me a story about garbage trucks and a boy named Charlie and the Grinch. And we get this really creative story time. So, I mean, there's just so many applications. We're certainly in the exploratory stages, but it's exciting to see the kinds of things that some of our panelists have already talked about.
Yeah. All right. And Lynn, you shared some use cases, things that are on your mind, but I just would love to give you the opportunity to share. Is there anything else that you're seeing right now that you're particularly interested in, particularly in the education space that you would?
So I love all the examples that have been provided, and I agree with all of those. Just to provide something different, I think, we're becoming definitely a multicultural society, and I think AI can help with language learning. Those of us who want to learn another language, or I've been at my church been helping teach English language learners, people from all over the world that are coming to try to learn some English. And I think these AI tools can help a lot in trying to learn a new language, providing exercises in real time, providing feedback so that you can improve as you go forward. And I think that's just another example of somewhere an area that I think AI is going to be very helpful.
Right. Sarah, I want to follow up on some of the observations that you shared. And, you've been a member of this working group that SCORE has pulled together over the last year on the ways in which artificial intelligence could impact and support teaching and learning. And I'm curious about, from your perspective at the state board, how is K-12 education in Tennessee responding to some of the advancements that we're seeing in these tools? And maybe what opportunities do you think might exist or could be coming for the ways that the technology could support teaching and learning? I know one of the things that we've talked about in the past is how do we, as an example, embed some of these skills into what students are learning in the K-12 experience. But I'd be curious about what you're seeing in the K-12 experience in Tennessee specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I would say currently K-12 education response is tentative. And I think that's a good place to be, because if we're thinking about innovations and trying to foster an environment where the kinds of things Dr. Langford and Joe were talking about in terms of student interventions, student supports, teacher supports are possible, I think it's going to have to be kind of a balanced approach. Like we, as you mentioned in your blog, have passed a law at the state level around requiring districts and charter management operators to have some kind of policy on AI on the books. And TSBA, the Tennessee School Boards Association, has helped with a model policy around sort of like what are the data protections and sort of security pieces, plagiarism, prevention, kind of the defensive mechanisms I would say that we need to have in place, like the guardrails. And then from there, I really think the state's role is to step back, listen, learn, work with philanthropy, work with SCORE to kind of convene networks like you have done around AI and the ways that it can really enhance student teaching and learning. But not to put too many barriers up in terms of the pilots and what's possible. I do think we can be a convener. We can think about our superintendent's conference. We can think about other ways and times when district leaders in particular, charter leaders come together to talk about what they're seeing and the ways that it's really helping enhance the learning environment. I think also we are going to need to be thinking about two things. Supports for teachers, as Dr. Parker mentioned, this is not something that people just wake up knowing. And so there's some training and some resources around training for teachers and educators that I think at some point here, the state will need to step in and think about our role there. And then I also think for student standards, we've just recently revised computer science standards, but when you think about the application across disciplines that AI will have, not only for the teaching, but for the learning, we need to think about at what point there are different ways we need to examine our student instructional standards or maybe a guide that goes along with them. But I think that's still something that we're thinking a lot about at the state level in terms of the sports for teachers and the student instructional standards in particular.
And then Scott, maybe just building on that, you gave two examples earlier of tools that you're piloting in Sumner County, and would love for you to talk more about what that's looking like. How is the district hoping that AI might support instruction, and maybe what's the process been like for launching and sort of learning about the impact of some of these tools? I know, one that we talked about specifically in our working group is Course Mojo is a really kind of promising tool. So we'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what that's looking like in Sumner County.
Yeah, I think the first thing, and I think this picks up on something that Sarah said just a minute ago, is we have to really understand what we're trying to do with teaching and learning. With AI coming, you better know where you hang your hat in terms of how you think about instruction and what you're trying to do. So like for us, it's easy because we hang our hat on quality tier 1 instruction using high quality materials, quality interventions. Joe, you mentioned Orton Gillingham. Ours is steeped in Orton Gillingham, and we want kids exposed to that every day with the proper supports. I think we've all been around classrooms and districts around the state and country where there are rooms full of Chromebooks and iPad carts that aren't utilized for much of a purpose other than distraction or multiple different platforms. I think sometimes it works because we have a child that's struggling with reading and our desire to help them. We hit them with 5 or 6 different approaches for intervention, and all we do is provide more confusion. So for us, we wanted to use AI to get more simple and to provide support both to our students and teachers. And, I'm the son of a football coach, so I grew up breaking my teeth on the wisdom of Bear Bryant. And he said he would only hire an assistant coach if he was smarter than him, because otherwise he didn't need him. And I think that's kind of our goal with AI is it something that makes us smarter, faster, more efficient, more cost effective, where then we can turn that time into being more innovative and strongly support students. So for Course Mojo, real quickly, we've been made very strategic choices in the AI space, because honestly, a lot of them are gimmicky. Or they're a variation of a Model T4. Here it is, and it's the same thing we've gotten from publishers forever. Course Mojo built around our curriculum. So when our kids are getting prompts, it's not generating their thinking for them. It's pushing them to think more deeply about the content that they've read. And it goes as deep as it's saying, go to page 25 and reread the second paragraph and then answer this question. It monitors their talk time. It monitors their participation. Interestingly, and I would encourage, if anybody wants to come out and see it, just contact us. We'll be happy to let you come out and see it, because I think it's hard to visualize until you see it. But I'll close with this on Course Mojo. In addition to the student support, which is just unbelievable, it's like having a teaching assistant with each child. it provides such resources for a teacher to remove the workload on the teacher and help them turn around feedback almost instantly. The teacher has a dashboard and it's measuring student effort and student work, and it's identifying areas where they're struggling. Because, we all go up to a student that we know is struggling and we say, "How are you doing?" Well, if they knew how they were doing, or if they knew where they were struggling, they would have already self-corrected it. They don't know. And a lot of times we teach kids to be quiet and roll on, and they never get the learning that they need. This pinpoints for the teacher exactly where they're struggling and gives them a report. Where it's going next is not just an individualized student report, but also immediate on-the-spot guidance to the teacher for questions that they can ask to go to the next level. Course Mojo has intentionally taken the Wit and Wisdom curriculum and not been limited by 2D worksheets and things like that, but tried to really push it to how do they really dig into what student understanding is. A huge thing that we're seeing that we're just starting to tap into is support for new teachers. 48.8% of our new teachers now are coming through job embedded. We expect that number will rise to close to 75-80% over the next decade. So providing support for new teachers that don't have an educational background, how do we do that? One of the things we push is lesson internalization. One of our new teachers, brand new to the profession, said after using Course Mojo that she couldn't imagine teaching without it, because it helps her internalize the lesson. It's helped her how to know what specific questions to get at understanding and make sure that her students are understanding. The partnership with Course Mojo, they're constantly asking what we need and then adapting it. Course Mojo can spell and do grammar now. It was better than ChatGPT, but it's learned tremendously over the last 6 months. Timely is another great product that we're using, and it's helping us, as I mentioned earlier, with our high school scheduling. And again, if you work with Timely, former educators that understand the importance and frustrations of scheduling in middle school and high school, and taking about 100 hours per administrator or counselor off building that schedule to free them up to do other things.
Awesome, Scott. Thanks for the sort of specificity of those examples and how they're playing out. And I just would add to your point about coming to see how these tools actually work, at least in our experience at SCORE. I'll share this at the end. Like, there's nothing like actually trying the tool and seeing what it looks like to help you understand what it can do and what it actually can't do, particularly in supporting teaching and learning. Lynn, I want to shift now to the post-secondary space and sort of what this is looking like there. And would love for you to share a bit about how the goals of the AI Tennessee initiative at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, connect with how post-secondary institutions should be thinking about preparation for students for jobs of the future. I'll also note, and I'll mention this for you, Lynn, and maybe Joe can also share some thoughts on this too, but we have a question that someone asked in the Q&A around, what kinds of degrees or undergraduate pathways should students be pursuing to be able to, be good users of these kinds of tools and think about how they embed in the workplace. And so, Lynn, maybe I'll start with you in terms of sharing your perspective on how this is playing out in post-secondary education.
Sure. Consistent with what I was talking about earlier, regardless of what your primary interest is or your primary career area is, I think people are going to need to have AI skills. And so as part of the AI Tennessee initiative at University of Tennessee, this past fall, past summer, a new college began called the College of Emerging and Collaborative Studies. And within that college, a new degree program was started, several, but one was Applied AI. And this is for people who can learn about AI in the context of the primary discipline that they're studying. So let's say you are a nurse and you want to get a nursing degree, but you also want to learn about how AI can be used in nursing. Or maybe you're in supply chain management and you want to be a supply chain management expert, but you also want to learn about AI in that context. This is a degree program that allows you to tailor and craft your degree according to your interests so that you can get not only your main disciplinary expertise, but also the AI skills relevant for that domain. And I think this is the mindset of how we should think about post-secondary education and then preparing students for post-secondary education in thinking about primary interest, and then how what AI tools are relevant for that primary interest. So that you don't have to become a generic AI expert, but you're learning about tools that are specific to, let's say, mechanical engineering. What are the AI tools that are being used now, or engineering in general. And so I think that's the general approach that we should all think about is, yes, you need to have that basic AI literacy, but then you begin building based on different areas of interest so that you have some tailored tools to what you're interested in. And so that's the approach. Number one is that you can, at UT, you could have this degree that I just mentioned. Number two is that regardless of what you're studying, hopefully embedded in every degree program on campus are some modules about AI in that discipline. So you don't go to the extent of getting a degree in something like applied AI, but you still have some modules or some learning experiences for AI use in whatever your degree program is. And I think that's the right model to think about. It's not one size fits all, but it's about how you tailor it to your primary interest.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. All right. And then, Joe, we've moved from K-12 to higher education to sort of workforce, and would love for you to share a little bit more about how you are seeing and hearing business leaders think about the influence that AI is having on the workforce, and maybe even specifically thinking back to the question about post-secondary education. What do you think is changing or might change around the kinds of candidates and talent that employers are seeking or will be seeking for jobs in the future?
Yeah, I think that specifically to that issue, we're becoming less concerned with traditional degrees and much more concerned with technical proficiency, and so as we're looking for new roles, as we're doing continuing education for current employees, there is a lot of there's a lot of effort across all of our businesses to encourage employees at all levels to use things like ChatGPT, really just for familiarity with the technology. The idea of I mentioned earlier brainstorming. It's interesting in a service economy like ours, and especially where we are in Tennessee. We deal a lot with tourism and on Old Smoky with manufacturing. So our teams are implementing this type of technology, whether it's manufacturing or regulatory compliance, or even the forward-facing retail element with clerks that are selling tickets at the ski resort. You've got as we're implementing new applications and allowing the consumer to be able to interact with technology, we've got to have employees that are able to, on the back end, to be able to problem solve and do things that are, they're probably a little bit more on the soft skill side, where we're talking about creativity or critical thinking, or even the emotional intelligence and the human judgment that's required to help along the way on some of these projects. So when we talk about literacy, I think that's kind of where it starts, and certainly for me as an employer, I hope that as kids are moving through high school, that they're getting some exposure to the technology, and then to the point of specialization within each different pocket of jobs that are currently in place in our organizations. There is specific training, but I think a lot of that more is technical proficiency that's coming along within that sector. So that's I think the broad literacy around AI and being able to learn and not be afraid of the technology. I think that's probably.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical, Joe, too, just as both K-12 leaders and also post-secondary institution leaders are constantly thinking about coursework and what skills are they building for students, and what to certain career degree pathways look like. I think that perspective is really critical, and your point about perhaps the technical skills sometimes being even more important than what the actual degree says, I think is a really, really important insight. So we've talked a lot about the possibilities, and I think certainly on our team at SCORE, we're very excited about the ways in which these tools could support teaching and learning. And I think it's important to take a moment to just reflect on any challenges or concerns that may be elevated too. And I will just note, we had a question that someone asked specifically about how might we overcome some of the fears that, specifically that school districts may have around artificial intelligence. And Scott, I want to turn back to you and ask you, what potential challenges might inadvertently, as an example, prevent K-12 schools and districts from leveraging AI to support educators and students. How have you mitigated those challenges or those concerns? What does that look like as you're implementing some of these tools in Sumner County?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just overcoming fear, like identifying what are legitimate fears, like protecting student anonymity, student data, those kind of things, but not saying like, oh my God, kids are going to cheat on their writing prompt because they're going to use 100% kids are going to use ChatGPT to write. And we're just going to have to learn to deal with that. But we've been dealing with that for as long as people put pen on paper. So we can't allow ourselves to be overcome with fear and try to ban it because it won't work. I think the other thing is to avoid policies where we say, hey, it's just an open, let's go do everything because this is really cool. So again, how do we structure to understand, what are our bedrock principles that we're going to hang our hat on, and we're going to focus there, and build out and identify make strategic choices that help us become smarter, more innovative, more efficient. While also understanding, I think the biggest thing is not going to be the AI tools themselves. It's going to be the need to be flexible, especially at the middle school and high school level, to understand that for the first time in 125 years, high school is about to change dramatically. And so we've got to manage the change for fear to say that it's going to look like we have to have more K-12 partnerships with higher ed. We have to have more apprenticeships. What Sarah said earlier about career coaching. We have a career coach in each high school. They're doing 313 one-to-ones with student a year, which is amazing, but that's more than one person can sustain. AI, just like you mentioned, David, with tutoring, can fill in that career coaching gap as well, and then triage so we can apply our resources where they're most needed. I would say one big obstacle that I see that we need to address is that we have a state requirement to teach all kids computer science between middle school and high school. And I was completely in support of that when we started pushing for it. I think we need to rapidly pivot and look at making that the basic AI that Lynn mentioned earlier, so we can teach kids responsible use, staying human, and then what are the ethical obligations to using AI.
Scott, that was a perfect recommendation, because I'm going to turn next to Sarah, who I think would have a critical role in making a change like that happen. And Sarah, obviously I know a lot of folks know there's new state law last year that required K-12 districts, public charter schools, and higher education institutions to adopt and implement AI policies, which I think spurred a lot of conversation around professional development, data privacy, access to AI in schools. And so would love to ask you, what do you see as the state's role in helping to foster the kinds of environments that Scott just described that encourage Gen AI exploration and sharing, but also, being thoughtful about things like data privacy and use, and perhaps if there is an update to the computer science requirements in the state, we can say that it started, here. Yes, but Sarah, what would your thoughts be on?
Well, I'm having a lot of thoughts, and I'm laughing because Dr. Langford, thank you for teaming up. I mean, government is known for doing a lot of things well. Moving quickly is not always at the top of the list. And so I'm laughing in part because, again, AI is changing so fast. We just implemented, as you said, Dr. Langford, these computer science standards. And already, I think that's great feedback. We do need, as I was mentioning before, we do need to think about how we integrate AI standards. But by the time we do it, they will have changed. So I think it is going to be one of these where we're going to have to work in a very nimble way, in some ways outside of the requirements and regulations, because the requirements and regulations that will happen at the state level are probably going to be like a little too late in some cases. And I think there was a question in the chat, because when you think about what's the state role in helping foster innovative environments? Well, certainly it's going to be to stay in touch with people like Dr. Langford and the folks in Hamilton County and the places across the state that are really leading in these pilots and have secured resources on their own to figure out where they can really lean in and use these different technologies to enhance their core learning opportunities with students. But I also worry a lot about the districts that are not going to be on the leading edge and are going to be, again, in the same way that industries that are leading with AI are going to be having a competitive advantage in the field, districts will also, and those students that are lucky enough to attend those districts. So we need to think about across our districts, ensuring that all districts have the chance to be exposed, get their teachers trained, like think about the opportunities in a way that's not going to be really lagging in some areas and put those students like behind the curve in a way that's going to disadvantage them. So I think again, we through the law that was passed kind of set some guardrails around the parameters around safety and security. I think on the innovation side, it's going to be making sure we have resources and opportunities that might not be from the state board. It may be partners like the Department of Education or TOS or TSBA. SCORE certainly is stepping into this space to convene people around the ways that it can enhance environments across the state and make sure we have resources and available ways to help all districts kind of get to the starting line at least.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And I'm thinking about some of the examples that Joe gave earlier around what's needed in the workforce. And it seems to be like one of the things that we might want to think about as a state is even how might we help students better understand the difference between AI generated content and non-AI generated content, because that might even be a place to start in just building sort of some basic AI literacy. Yeah, exactly. And then I want to turn, we mentioned this earlier, Tennessee has an AI advisory council, and two of our panelists, Lynn and Joe, are part of that group, which launched last year. And the council is tasked with recommending and supporting the implementation of policies and strategies regarding AI use and adoption in the state. And so would love to ask both Joe and Lynn, how is the advisory council, the state's AI advisory council, thinking about the ways in which we as a state should support industries and also perhaps K-12 and higher education to adapt and respond to how AI will impact our state's economy? We had a question, I think, in the chat specifically about how are we building sort of AI literacy among the broader population. And I think this is sort of probably a question that's come up in the task force's work as well. So I don't know, Joe or Lynn, who would want to start there, but would love your perspective on that work.
I'm happy to jump in. Specifically, I would say I'm most squarely focused on the work that our subcommittee on workforce development and labor is considering, and very much, we're as a subcommittee, we're largely driven by the idea of trying to ascertain the opportunities that exist that will allow for job development to grow more quickly in the state, and to make the state more attractive for industry that's looking to expand. And so as we're considering the needs of employers and job creators that might be coming into the state, how do we collaborate with educational institutions to ensure that our workforce is properly equipped with the tools that are going to be needed going forward? I'm excited to hear Dr. Parker's comments on this, because I think that she obviously is a great person to have leading the charge with the council. But great work's being done across the board. But specifically, on the economic impact, that's at least where I individually am focused, and as a subcommittee, I'm most excited about the work that's happening.
Yeah, so the work, as Joe mentioned, the work of the advisory council has been crafted into a handful of subcommittees that are doing various things, and I've been active on one that's looking at some of the outcomes of AI, potentials for how it will maybe change how the government works, or how the state can leverage AI. And then also in the policy perspective, how should the state of Tennessee think about AI policies? Of course, it's still somewhat early in the work of the council, but I think broadly speaking, the attitude is very much of trying to embrace AI to the extent that it helps improve efficiencies, help provide additional opportunities, helps everyone to be prepared, helps build up new industry, thinking about maybe investments that can help build out that capability across the state. So it's still kind of early, but I think generally speaking, the attitude is one of helping all sectors, the industry, the education space, the government space, to figure out how best to use AI to improve the outcomes, to improve maybe the efficiencies or quality of life or security and so forth across the board. How you do that is multifaceted, and certainly I think it starts, in my opinion, with having policies that are open to innovation, that don't express a fear of change, but recognizing that these are technologies that are here, and figuring out how to use them appropriately to to better the state. So that's kind of where we're headed.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. One just follow-up question for you, and Joe may have thoughts on this too, but one person added a question really around how might things like XAI impact the growth of this field in the state. Obviously, the data that you showed, Lynn, was prior to the investments and the announcement of the investments that are being made in Memphis. But I would just be curious, either Lynn or Joe or really anyone, if there are thoughts you may have on how that investment, particularly in Memphis, may sort of turbocharge some of the talent needs that we're seeing in this space in Tennessee.
Well, I'll just speak generically or generally. I think when people see that there's an opportunity, right, like next door, and or in my own hometown or whatever, that requires these kind of skills, I think it brings reality home, and it says, oh, I can do AI. Because I think a lot of the conversation, and kind of getting back to a point that was made about fear of these technologies, I think a lot of times people are afraid of what they don't see or they don't have an opportunity to use. And so when you see that, hey, there's a a big opportunity opening up down the road here, and maybe I could get a job there, then suddenly you're empowered to say, I can do this, I can learn these kind of skills, and it makes it relevant. So I think broadly speaking, as more and more companies and opportunities come in that provide these kinds of opportunities, it will give more of an attitude of, hey, that's open to me. I don't have to move to the San Francisco Bay Area in order to have a job in this area. I can stay here in the state that I love and do amazing work in these AI areas. So I think that as those opportunities pop up, I think it'll give more of a sense of opportunity and kind of a can-do, let's get involved kind of attitude.
Yeah.
I hope.
Joe, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I certainly I appreciate it. The idea of investment like XAI coming in and creating opportunities for folks in West Tennessee is super exciting to me, because I think that it gets that ball rolling where we have some momentum, and there's new investment within certain industries. And as we are able to jump on the opportunity as a state, and as we consider that from an educational perspective, the more that we're equipping our citizens with the tools needed to be able to work in that economy, it's just gonna, we're gonna attract more investment, we're gonna attract more jobs. And so as we think through this, not only from the individual level, but also from, institutionally, how are we working together to create more opportunity for people? At the end of the day, that's what's most exciting to me, is the ability to really build on that. And I'm glad this conversation is going for that reason.
Great. Thanks, Joe. All right, so this discussion has provided a ton of insights, lots to consider across each of these different sectors, and really at the intersection of kind of education and career in the age of artificial intelligence. And perhaps for a final question, I'd love for each of you to provide a bit of a perspective on what's next for the Tennessee partners who are here, those tuning in, and specifically ask you, what recommendations might you have for Tennessee leaders who are working across the education to workforce continuum as the state grapples with the undeniable influence that AI has and will increasingly have? Are there recommendations or things you would suggest for leaders in this space as they're thinking about these tools and opportunities? And I'll just mention, I think there are some even very sort of simple things that we've begun to try on our team, and that have been elevated in conversations I've had with leaders in this space. Things like forcing yourself as a leader to do something with AI every day, right? So that you can learn what works and what doesn't, and the ways in which it can solve problems, and the ways in which it can. That's obviously a very sort of tactical and tangible example, but would love for you each to share any thoughts or recommendations that you might have for the leaders who are joining today. And I'll call on anybody to start off, but would love for each of you to share. So whoever feels the spirit moving them can start.
Well, David, I'll build on what you just said about, forcing yourself to do a little AI every day. I had a professor years ago that, he was like, let's do it. And so you could sit there and you could plan a research project and you could lay out all your plans. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this and this and this. And you just keep digging into your planning to the point where you're in plan cycle, you never get out of your plan loop. And so he would always say, just do it. And I think that's the attitude that we need to foster everywhere in education and in the workforce is let's just dive in. Let's not be afraid of it. Let's just figure it out. Let's take steps. Yes, you have to do it bit by bit. But sort of take off chunks that seem manageable. Look at pilot projects that seem manageable. Look at what others have done. Share best practices, as has already been mentioned, and then just do it. And I think that's the most impactful approach that we could just take across the board is just let's dive in and let's sort of take ownership of our workplaces, of the education environment, and just at least do small pieces to get going and get more comfortable with it.
Yeah, David, I would echo that. I am, yeah, I feel like it's easy to fear things. It's easy to fear the negatives. It's easy to fear things like plagiarism and abuse of the technology. But I really believe that the idea of embracing it and working with it, as a kid in fifth grade, I remember always wanting to use my calculator in math class, and it was in some ways that calculator was a little bit of a superpower, and I think AI now is really largely a superpower for a lot of us to be able to harness the ability to do things that our minds might not be able to do on their own, and so as a business person and as a dad, I really I hope to see more and more use of the technology in the classroom, and encouraging kids to unleash the power of the technology to be creative, learn to be critical thinkers, and to do it in a responsible way. But we're not gonna drive that kind of growth and harness the power of it by burying our heads in the sand. I think it really takes embracing it in some way, and I appreciate everything that's been said today on that front from an educational perspective. It's exciting to think that we can give kids the tools to really thrive in a new economy.
I think it's really important for all of us to tell these stories because there's going to be an attempt to scare people even more greatly about AI. I think one is just naming, hey, if you've driven from here to there and got an estimated time of arrival, you've used AI. I think we can name a lot of things like that to kind of take some of the fear, but then I think naming the successes, I shared about the new teacher. What about, I had a pretty severe learning disability. I had teacher parents and a whole teacher family that worked with me until I could read, but a lot of families don't have that. So the fact that we could have a kid diagnosed earlier and earlier with dyslexia, and then even begin to be able to where they could, with confidence, share an idea that they had, that's such a powerful thing. So yeah, we're going to fail fast. We're going to fail often. The world's going to be sand underneath our feet for a while, but let's tell the stories of the great things that we can do for kids and teachers, and let's hang our hat there. Because I think, as Lynn highlighted, and then showing like, hey, look, this is coming. We can be proactive and jump into it and do well for the state of Tennessee, or we can choose a different path.
I guess that leaves me to wrap up. I don't have too much else to add. I would agree with everything the others have said. I mean, I think we can't wait. We have to jump in. I think we have to ask questions and get curious. From a state perspective, I mean, again, we're not going to be necessarily leading in this, but I want to make sure we're not lagging too far in the ways that we set districts up for thinking about their responsibilities to bring students and teachers along. I think there's going to be a resource allocation at some point needed to make sure that we've got equity across districts and their ability to access some of these technologies. But yeah, I think we have to stay curious. I think we have to bring people together and look to partners like TOS and SCORE and the Department of Education, people who are convening district leaders and other national leaders to make sure that we're really having these conversations regularly about where we're seeing the innovation, the opportunity, and some of the challenges too, because it's all, moving so rapidly that, like I said, government needs to stay on the train, but I wouldn't look to us to be at the front. We got to make sure we're not lagging too far and keeping up with the trend lines.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. I want to just maybe share in closing a couple of things that we've been thinking about at SCORE on this question. And I think we could probably pop up these two slides as we sort of share a couple of these thoughts. But, in the conversations that we've had at SCORE with partners and also really reflecting on today's conversation, it's very clear to us that this work is becoming increasingly important in benefiting student outcomes, teacher instructional practice, bringing career preparation to the fore for the jobs of the future. And our learnings in this space really have helped us identify some key principles for Tennessee to keep in mind as we think about the ways in which Gen AI could reach its full potential in supporting student learning. And just want to elevate those principles that have been top of mind for us here. And I think I would just say really important that we remember that AI is a tool that aids in creativity, productivity, understanding. And in order for the tool to be effective, safely used, students and educators have to have the opportunity to learn with it and about AI through AI literacy, professional development. And in addition, learning from existing AI pilots, the kinds of things, as an example, that Scott talked about, and sharing those learnings with others, we think will really help ensure more comprehensive access to the information that's coming out of those pilots, which in turn can help prevent gaps in access to AI opportunities, particularly perhaps for schools and school districts that are under or sort of lesser resourced than others in the state. And we also know that the more we know about Gen AI and what's possible, the better we'll be able to ensure the safe use and ethical use of the technology. The one other thing I'll just note here that we heard in conversations that we've had, and I think sort of speaks to some of the things that the panel brought up today, is that we're so early in the development of these tools that there's a huge opportunity to be able to tell folks in the technology sector which problems we need solving in education, whether that's in tutoring or the time that teachers are spending on non-instructional tasks or on things like college and career counseling and advising. And that's certainly been top of our mind for our team as well. We also believe it's important for Tennessee to reflect on very specific questions that we think we need to answer. For example, assessing what instructional challenges and capacity needs could be supported by AI, and then provide the education to industry to industry leaders and education leaders around how AI could be used and sort of experimented with to solve some of those challenges. And in order really to foster those kinds of learning environments, training and development of AI literacy for students and educators will be critical. We talked about this in terms of sort of how we might think about the ways in which AI literacy is being incorporated into some of the coursework and standards that we have as a state. And then really determining how we could provide useful guidance as we approach new technology that will really be critical in helping us ensure equal opportunity to leveraging and understanding AI use in Tennessee. So if you're interested in learning more about some of the takeaways we've had in this space, just popping up a QR code here to our most recent blog post, and really appreciative of the partnership and collaboration of leaders who have worked with us on this topic and that we're learning from in better understanding and exploring what's possible in this space. We believe that for education to unlock workforce opportunity, it has to respond to evolutions in technology and the economy. But the transformative potential of AI can only be unlocked if teachers and students are learning about it, learning with it, and are using it to understand what it can do and what it can't. And so fostering an environment as a state for innovative pilot programs, for engaging with partners about what's possible, and for implementing AI with principles that are really grounded in wise discovery, curiosity. We think that's really critical for how Tennessee should be leading in this work moving forward in ways that can improve student outcomes, reimagine the teaching role, and ensure, more Tennesseans are prepared for the jobs of the future. So with those final thoughts, I want to maybe finally thank our panelists today. Really grateful to have each of you sharing your perspective. Dr. Parker, thank you for the presentation and sort of keynote discussion. And then really grateful to Joe, Scott, and Sarah for sharing your thoughts and perspective on how this work is playing out in practice. And then finally, I want to thank my colleague, Amanda Glover, who's done so much work for our team around this topic, and who played a leading role in the blog post that we just released on this, and I know more coming in that space. So thank you all again for being with us today. This presentation and information will be available. We'll share that out with attendees as a follow-up, and really appreciate your partnership and collaboration in exploring the future of this work and in future conversations with our team as well. Thanks so much.